Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Chronicast. I'm the Game Chronicler, and today we're going to be talking about how real magic would be science. Now, there's a big problem in a lot of video games where magic becomes the bullcrap explanation for things, and they act like, oh, well, there would be no explanation because everyone just relies on magic. Well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense because, in my mind, if you live in a world of magic, wouldn't you study it? Wouldn't you go out of your way to try and learn more about it and try and, get better at it? Wouldn't that be the whole point of like having a mages school and all that? One of my favorite games that I'm playing right now is Tales of Exilia, which is, of course, another JRPG, which I just have a soft spot for. But one of the things I really like is the fact that Tales of Exilia has a way of every bit of the magic is explained. There's a bit of a science to it. Nothing is just, oh, and it's magic because. Now, yes, it is a bit explained by virtue of being a religion, and that's not incredibly helpful all the time. But they explain like the monologue, how you pull from this kind of magic to do that kind of thing, and it actually makes sense. It makes me feel like it at least put the thought that they did with their magic on some similar tier to, say, The Last Airbender, which a lot of people might say, oh, well, that's blasphemy to compare the two. And I'll admit, it's not that big of a masterpiece, but I really like it. And the fact that the magic is explained makes it a bit more accessible to me. Maybe that's just a scientific part of my mind that needs that sort of thing. Now, when people, now, you're probably wondering where my problem lies because you're thinking of the Elder Scrolls, you're thinking of even Final Fantasies where magic tends to be at least somewhat logical, even though I would have loved it if Final Fantasy X did more to explain itself than just being a prequel to Final Fantasy VII. Anyway, um, the real reason that bothers me is when people then say, oh, well, when you play the Elder Scrolls, between each game, thousands of years have passed. It seems to have a lack of perspective on just how our society functions because 1,000 years to us, in 1,000 years from now, people won't be complaining about flying cars the same way we are. We're complaining that they don't exist. They'll be complaining that it's way too noisy in their house because they're in a flyby zone or something like that. And that sounds like BS, but you have to remember, it wasn't but a little over 100 years ago that people would have given you funny looks for trying to move some carriage without a horse in front of it. And they would have assumed that we had tiny mules in the front and underneath the bonnet trying to move the car. It just makes sense that the world would progress forward. A magical world would progress forward differently than a scientific world. That is a valid argument. But I do believe that a magical world would still move forward. You would eventually see maybe magic-powered cars. Maybe magic forms of transportation would just become a bit more normal. Now, of course, the world of the Elder Scrolls is a war-torn hellscape on a good day. Beautiful, but a war-torn hellscape. So, of course, clearly, it's going to have its problems where we have to say, oh, well, yeah, it's not, yeah, they would be making more science, but dragons, man, and giant, portals to hell. Okay, I'll buy that. I'll buy that giant portals to hell would put a crimp on science moving forward. But thousands of years, and it's not all conflict. I'm sorry, but logically, you do more with magic over time. You learn ways to harness it. You learn ways to maybe make a better standard of living for yourselves. I mean, hell, even in the Pokemon universe, they go out of their way to say, oh, well, where do we get electricity from? Pokemon. Well, then why'd you build a dam? Because it makes it so kids can recognize it. Well, at least the magic there is the narrator being lazy and not the people creating the subject matter being lazy. Now, I would say, oh, well, maybe this isn't necessary to building a better game. And some people are saying that you don't need to know that much. It's a video game. You see a Goomba, you stomp a Goomba, a coin comes out, wash your hands of it, and that's how the day goes. But I don't buy that. When you actually give a crap about how your magic works, about how your anything works, it makes a better world. Tom Clancy knew that, and he didn't use magic, he used guns. But the fact of the matter is that understanding how a gun works is just as important to a army simulator as it is important to a video game to understand where its magic comes from. not just so you can say, oh, well, here's an explanation, so we're not just calling it magic, but here's an explanation, and underneath these rules, couldn't you do this? Underneath these rules, couldn't that happen? Couldn't you create more interesting scenarios, a more interesting world through the virtue of simply saying, and my magic has a rule set, and that rule set makes enough sense so that I can go off and do more interesting things, but more importantly, so that my world is complete, so that the video game that I'm building is on a stronger foundation. And when people say that, oh, well, the story sucks, it's entirely my fault for writing a crappy story, and not because I failed to explain or failed to have an explanation for what was going on. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents. I'm the Game Chronicler. I'm going to be here as often as I can, and I'll see you guys when I see you guys.